Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am Disco Kitty the Crappy Crafter. Today we're going to be playing with air dry clay. Actual clay. This is an actual clay base. It's real clay, as opposed to this stuff, which is not a real clay. So I will be comparing this air dry clay to this stuff that I made here in my own kitchen with water, baking soda, and cornstarch. Now, I imagine that the baking soda is there to keep the cornstarch from turning into a non-Newtonian fluid, which is fine, you know, if you want to just put water and cornstarch together. You do that and you have fun with it, because you can beat on it, it gets really hard, and then you slow and it's really soft, but that's okay. So, yes, we're going to compare this one and this one. And if I can remember where I got the instructions for this, I will go and I will leave the link down below, because she had like 4 or 5 different air dry clay recipes. There was this one, which is supposed to be like this. And then there was another one that she calls a porcelain base, which of course it has absolutely no porcelain. It has no real clay in it, so it's not a porcelain base. But it's supposed to be finer than this one is. I made this one first. Maybe I'll make the other one some other time. And it had salt dough, you know, which is basically what Play-Doh is, right? And there was another one, I don't remember. Anyways, so yes, we're going to be comparing these two air dry clays. We're not going to make anything particularly special with them today, because as we know, I'm not actually a very good crafter. So I just want to see how they react, how they work, if you can color them, or if you just have to paint them afterwards, or if you can paint them afterwards. I mean, I know you can paint this stuff. This is basically just clay that you don't have to fire, but it's still like real clay. But because it's not fired, it's not going to get that real strength, so it's going to be very fragile. And I imagine this stuff is going to be stupidly fragile, but we'll see how it goes. Let's get right into it. Alright, well, the very first thing I have to do is condition the clay, or moisturize the clay, moisten the clay, make it damp, make it moist, make it not crumbly. And I will say it a couple of times, but this is not going to be fair, because this clay was opened years ago, but whatever. Anyways, so we're going to start with the alcohol inks, and this is I think it's technically an alcohol ink. It comes from Sophie and Toffee, and it's from their Morandi pigment line, but I don't know if it's truly an alcohol ink or if it's something different. I don't know, but it works. Here we're going to go in with the Meeden alcohol paint. Acrylic paints. We're going to go in with acrylic paints, and I am going to mix these two up. See, you'll notice that the darker one, you'll notice here, the darker one is the rounded one, and it was the paint one. And if you'll notice over there in the corner, I have swapped their positions. And now I think the alcohol one is the paint one, and the paint one is the alcohol one. So I'm going to label them wrong here. You know, once I put them in this little trinket dish, my little pinch pot. Yeah, you can tell I didn't do a lot of clay in high school. We just didn't have a lot of... opportunity. There was a clay specific class, I think, but I'm not really sure. I mean, I took 9th grade art, and it was fine, but it was very eclectic. It was like a little bit of everything, some paints, different kind of paints. I don't think we ever got into watercolor though. I think we just did acrylics, maybe even tempera. I don't even know. Tempera, not tempura. Tempura is food. Tempera. See, look, I'm putting an A there. It should be a P. I did that wrong. Oh, yeah, so what I'm doing here is I'm just making little grooves in these to see how well they'll hold, you know, like their structure while they're drying. So I did that wrong. The paint is on the right. So this is the stuff that I made. It is, you know, cornstarch and baking soda. And like I said, I think, or like I will say, I'm not sure. Like I said, I think the baking soda is just mainly to keep it from turning into a non-Newtonian fluid, because I'm pretty sure that's what cornstarch and water turn into. It's actually pretty fun. If you beat it, it gets very, very hard, but if you're very soft with it, it's very, very liquid. So here again, the paint is slightly darker, a lot darker. And we're going to make our little pinch pot, and this actually works really well. I have to admit, I was really surprised. It feels good, you know, it's not as messy as the clay was, but like I said, the clay was on the dry side, so I had to try to get it moistured, you know, again, which meant it was just all over, just literally everything. But you know, overall, I think this works. I'm gonna wax poetic about it in the outro. I really, really am, because this stuff worked really, really well. I was surprised. I mean, I don't use clay that often. I use mostly polymer clay and now air dry clay. But I mean, I should say foam air dry clay, you know, the foamy stuff. You'll see that next week. I did 2 of these videos in one day, and you'll see that next week. But yeah, I mean, this stuff worked pretty well. I liked it. I think it's great for kids. Yeah. And here we go with our last little piece. We'll get it in there, make a little flowery thing, and then we'll be all done. And then I can talk your ear off. Not like I haven't been talking your ear off the whole freaking time. Anyways, which, thank you for staying and listening to me all these years. Well, I don't think that was a very fair comparison at all, was it? Because here's the clay, air dry clay. And this is the next day. And even though I propped it up a little bit, it's still got a little drying to do. I'm just gonna have to put it upside down for its last little bit of drying. But this is the air dry clay, the clay. And so this was the alcohol ink, and this was the pigment powder. Although I feel like I mislabeled that because I feel like that's wrong. We'll have to go back in the video and see what is really what. I will have put, you know, markers. So that's the clay. And this is the what was it? Cornstarch and baking soda and water. That's what this is. So this is the reason why I think I mislabeled them too, because, you know, I thought they were pretty similar in dyeing technique anyways. And they certainly set up pretty well the same. But, yeah, I mean, it seems to work. It definitely doesn't have the same feel to it, you know, when you feel it. This feels like unsmoothed clay. This feels like, well, I mean, it's leaving powder on my hands. I don't know if you can see that, but, oh yeah, this is shedding. Ooh, look at that. Do you see that? This, however, nah. Yeah, it doesn't leave anything behind. So if you're gonna want to play with this stuff, and I'll leave the ingredients list down below along with the link if I can find the website, although I'm pretty sure I can, because when I look for air dry clay, you know, it's one of the first things that pops up. So yeah, so this is the stuff that I made at home, and you can see it's all nice and dried out. And this is the clay, and you can see it's still got a little ways to go, but they felt very similar, although, like I said, the reason why it wasn't a fair comparison is because this was fresh and damp and wet, and it was fresh. And this one I had opened, I don't know how many years ago. I had put it into a sealed zip top bag, but air still got into it anyways, so the section that I was pulling from was drier than I would have liked. One thing that I had to do before I was even able to use it was knead a boatload of water into it, and excuse me, I think that's the reason why it looks the way it does. All kind of, you know, it's not as smooth as it could have been. It's not as smooth as even this turned out to be. But hey, you know what? If you want a real cheap air dry clay for your kids, I highly recommend it. Add in some paint. Oh, that's what it was. It wasn't pigment powder, it was paint. Paint, yes. That's why I still think I labeled this one wrong. Anyways, I actually ended up doing 2 weeks worth of videos in the same day, so you'll see me referencing this video next week because I did them the same day. But that's for another time. But yeah, this would be fantastic to get kids into clay and working with air dry clay, and then when they're a little older they can start working with this stuff, and then when they're a little older and they can rent a space at a kiln, or you know, whatever, they can go to a pottery shop, and then they can start getting into the really cool stuff. Not saying you can't make really cool stuff with air dry clay, because there are some really talented people out there. I am not one of them though. But I have rambled long enough, and I probably didn't actually answer any of your questions, so if you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments, talk to me, let's have a conversation. And remember, homemade air dry clay is actually pretty good, especially when compared to, you know, clay, air dry clay that has basically dried out. That's on me though. So yeah, so with all that being said and done, thank you so much for visiting, and I'll see you next week. Stay safe.